It starts quietly. No shouting, no slammed doors, just a shift in the air. A boy sits at the dinner table, small shoulders, eyes fixed on his plate. He moves food around, hoping no one notices. He's learned a secret. When his sister speaks, the room warms. When his brother speaks, the room encourages. But when he speaks, the silence changes. Not soft silence, not peaceful silence. A silence that cuts. A silence that says, "You are a problem." It isn't always in words. Sometimes it's the sigh when he enters, the glance that lingers too long, the way his presence feels like an interruption, like a burden. And so he disappears. Not physically, but emotionally, psychologically. He folds into himself. He learns how to shrink, how to avoid, how to survive by vanishing. This is the silent life of the hated child, not hated in obvious cruelty, not hated in screams or slaps, but hated in energy, hated in the absence of warmth, hated in the way love is rationed, uneven, conditional. It's a comparison that cuts deepest. His sister glows under praise, his brother earns a cheer for good grades, but when it is his turn, the tone shifts, the air stiffens, the eyes sharpen, and he notices. Children always notice. They notice who gets celebrated. They notice who is seen. They notice who is welcomed with softness. And they notice that when it comes to them, the room feels colder. A child does not say, "My parents are flawed." A child says, "I must be flawed." That is the wound. Unloved is a condition. It hurts, but it can pass. Unworthy, that becomes an identity. That becomes the lens through which every moment is felt. And here is the tragedy. The child bends reality to preserve the bond, because parents are not just parents. They are the whole world. If the world rejects me, it must be my fault. If the world does not welcome me, I must change. This is how shame is born. This is how a soul learns to carry silence like a shield. Søren Kierkegaard once wrote, "Despair is the sickness of not becoming yourself." And here despair begins, not in spectacular violence, but in small daily erasures. A look, a sigh, a silence. The hated child learns them all, learns to decode the tiniest shift in mood, learns to expect rejection, learns to live as an intruder in their own home. This is how a child disappears, not from the world, but from themselves. And the world claps. What a quiet boy, so well behaved, so polite. But no one asks the question that matters most. At what cost? Rejection doesn't vanish. It doesn't stay in one moment. It seeps, it takes root, it settles into the nervous system. A raised eyebrow, a withheld smile, a tired sigh. Each one becomes a warning signal. Each one says, "You are not safe." The child's body learns fast. Rejection means danger. Danger means adapt. Stress hormones flood tiny veins. Cortisol, adrenaline. The body prepares for a fight that never ends. The brain reshapes itself. The amygdala sharpens, always scanning for threat. The prefrontal cortex weakens, the part that soothes, the part that calms. This is why, later in life, the hated child overreacts, not because they want to, not because they choose to, but because their body remembers. A pause in conversation feels like betrayal. A delayed reply feels like rejection. A neutral face feels like judgment. Peace feels suspicious. Chaos feels like home. And then, gaslighting. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. A child says, "That hurt." The parent replies, "You're too sensitive." A child says, "I feel alone." The parent replies, "Stop being dramatic." The child cries. The parent looks away, and the child learns, "My feelings are wrong, my memories are false, my reality cannot be trusted." This is the cruelest inheritance, not just rejection, but the erasure of truth itself. And so the child begins to doubt. Maybe it wasn't so bad. Maybe I'm imagining things. Maybe I am the problem. This doubt is carried forward. It grows up with them. It shapes how they see themselves. At school, they second-guess their answers. With friends, they hold back their truth. As adults, they wonder if their pain is even real. They apologize before speaking. They soften their words until nothing remains. They carry the belief, "My reality is not trustworthy." Søren Kierkegaard wrote that despair is blindness to the self. Gaslighting does exactly that. It blinds the child to their own mirror, so they grow, carrying wounds they can't name, carrying shame they can't explain, carrying a body that knows the truth, but a mind that has been trained to deny it. And yet, the body keeps the score. The nervous system remembers, even when the mind tries to forget. This is the inheritance of rejection, a body trained for fear, a heart trained for doubt, a mind taught to mistrust itself, and it will echo for years unless it is faced, unless someone finally says, "No, you are not too sensitive. What you felt was real." Children adapt. They always do. If love cannot be received, it must be earned. So the hated child invents strategies. They build masks, masks that work, masks that protect. Some chase perfection, straight A's, polished smiles, flawless performances, each achievement a question. Am I worthy now? Some become pleasers. They nod, they agree, they disappear into the needs of others. They laugh at jokes that wound, they swallow their voice, they say yes when their heart screams no. Some rebel. If they cannot be loved, they will not beg. They wear anger as armor. They fight to protect the hurt inside. They would rather be rejected for defiance than erased for existing. These masks are clever. They work. They shield the child from more pain. They keep the bond intact. They allow survival. But survival has a cost. The cost is the self, because years later the masks do not fall away. They cling. They harden. Perfection starts to feel like identity. People-pleasing feels like personality. Rebellion feels like destiny. But none of these are essence. They are strategies. They are scars stitched into roles. They are costumes worn so long that the child, now adult, forgets there was ever a face beneath. And this forgetting, this is despair. Kierkegaard once warned, "To despair is to forget that you are yourself." The hated child grows up believing the mask is real, believing perfection is who they are, believing compliance is their nature, believing rebellion is their truth. But beneath every mask, there is still a child, a voice that whispers in the quiet, "This isn't me. This was never me." Because masks are not neutral. They demand energy. The perfectionist burns out, the pleaser feels hollow, the rebel grows lonely. Each role protects, but each role exhausts, and no matter how polished the mask, the child beneath still aches. You see it in small moments, the perfectionist crying quietly over a minor mistake, the pleaser unable to choose a meal without checking what everyone else wants first. The rebel waking up after another night of anger, wondering why they still feel empty. Healing begins not by ripping the mask away, but by gently asking, "Who was I before I needed this?" and waiting long enough for the buried voice to answer, because the child is still there, waiting, tired, wanting to breathe again. Time moves on. The child grows taller, but the echoes remain. They echo in love. A partner's silence feels like abandonment. A text left unanswered feels like rejection. They are drawn to the familiar, distant, cold, withholding, not because they enjoy pain, but because pain feels like home. They echo in work. The hated child overperforms, every task done twice, every goal chased harder, and still the voice whispers, "Not enough, never enough." They echo in friendship, always giving, always listening, always carrying. But when it's their turn to need, they go silent. They do not know how to receive. And deep inside, the old gaslighting repeats, "You're exaggerating. You should be grateful. Stop being dramatic." So even as adults, they doubt themselves. They doubt their memories. They doubt their pain. But the body knows. The flinch when someone raises their voice. The rush of anxiety in still rooms. The suspicion when kindness appears. It is not madness. It is memory. And here lies the paradox. From this wound comes a gift. The hated child learns to read the room. They sense moods before words. They notice silence others ignore. What once was survival can become empathy. What once was fear can become intuition, but only if the cycle is seen, because what is unseen is repeated. Unseen pain becomes inherited pain. Silent wounds echo into the next generation. Children of hated children learn the same silence, the same fear, the same masks. Unless someone stops it, unless someone says, "It ends with me." And here is another echo, relationships that feel like rescue. They find partners to save, hoping that by fixing someone else, they will finally fix themselves. But the cycle repeats. Caretaker, therapist, peacekeeper. Roles learned at 7 years old return at 30. Even success cannot silence the echo. They graduate, they build careers, they raise families, and still the same questions rise. Am I enough? Do I deserve this? How long before it's taken away? This is how the past lingers, not as memory, but as expectation, as a script written long ago. But scripts can be rewritten, even echoes can fade. Awareness is the first break, to finally say, this is not weakness, this is history, and history can change. Healing does not begin with forgetting, it begins with naming. I was unwanted, I was unseen, I was gaslit into doubting myself. These words cut, but they also free, because shame thrives in silence. Naming brings light. The next step is compassion. Radical compassion, not indulgence, not excuses, but the decision to treat yourself with the gentleness you were denied. It is slow, it is awkward, it feels unnatural at first, but it is essential to rest without guilt, to forgive your mistakes, to speak to yourself as you would to a child in pain. This is reparenting, it is rebellion, it is refusing to repeat the cruelty you once received. Belonging can be rebuilt, not always with family, but with chosen family, friends who see you, communities who value you. Blood is not the only bond. The chaos of rejection does not have to end in despair. It can be transformed. It can become soil for empathy, for art, for courage, for connection. And perhaps the deepest work is turning back to the child at the table, looking him in the eyes, looking her in the eyes, and whispering, "You are enough. You are worthy. You belong." Healing is not about erasing the hated child, it is about welcoming them home. It is about saying, this story does not end in rejection. It ends in love. Because what once was despair can become transformation, and what once was silence can become a voice, your voice, finally free. But healing is not a straight line, it rises, it falls. Some days you will feel strong, other days you will feel small again. Both are part of the work. You may grieve the childhood you never had. You may feel anger, a fire that says, "I deserved better." Let that fire burn clean, do not fear it. It is proof you are alive, and slowly something shifts. The body learns safety, the heart learns trust, the mind learns quiet. Stillness no longer feels like danger. Peace no longer feels like a trap. Love no longer feels conditional. This is the gift of healing. Not that the past disappears, but that it loses its power to define you. And when you finally hold yourself, when you whisper what no one else did, you become the parent you needed, the friend you longed for, the protector you deserved. The hated child does not vanish. They are finally seen, and in being seen, they are set free. Healing also means practice, boundaries that protect, journals that give shape to chaos, therapy that steadies the nervous system, art, music, writing, turning silence into expression, and each small act, resting when you are tired, asking for help without apology, allowing joy without guilt, is a declaration. I am no longer living as the hated child. I am living as myself. This is not the end. It is the beginning. the slow creation of a life where love is not rationed but received, where belonging is not begged for but chosen, where worth is not earned but known. We carry echoes of childhood far longer than we realize, but every time you pause to listen, you begin to change the story. If these words touched something in you, know you are not alone. There are others here, thinking, feeling, searching, just like you. So let this be more than a moment. Let it be the start of a conversation. Leave a comment, share your truth, and let it reach someone who needs it. If you wish to walk further with us, subscribe and return to this space of quiet reflection. Together, we will keep exploring the shadows until they lead us back to light.